there's a tradition at Syracuse where we open every conversation and every event that we have with an acknowledgement. Though we are not on Syracuse University's campus, it's incumbent upon us to do so here as well, to acknowledge the contributions of the indigenous communities that have offered us the stewardship of land that we house Syracuse University. Syracuse is in Syracuse, New York, which is in Onondaga Nation territory, and so we honor and acknowledge the Haudenosaunee on whose ancestral land Syracuse University exists. It's important to recognize that because of the contributions that they've given both to the university and really our democracy as a country. Today's conversation is live streamed for us with assistance from the Internet Society of New York. Jolie is our amazing colleague here from the Internet Society who's helping us make sure that we not just enable our peers from around the world to participate in this conversation, but so that those who are not able to be here with us today or who maybe want to watching this in the future are able to see this. So this event will be live streamed. It's being live streamed around the world. It's being viewed around the world, and it will be saved on the internet so that future generations can see these conversations that we're having. But today's discussion, smart cities, AI, and community internet, and what that means for the acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals across Africa. You know, those of you who are not here don't know that we are in New York City in East 61st Street of Manhattan, a few blocks away from the United Nations. It actually was quite difficult for many of us to get here today because of the events of the General Assembly. And it's in this context that we situate this conversation as a continuation of the conversations that are happening at the UN. We thought about doing this event and put this event together as quickly as possible to kind of help to allow us to reimagine the opportunity that exists for a world that is in fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015, the world community organized to pass the Sustainable Development Goals, to agree on these 17 agenda items that will help to facilitate for a more inclusive world in a document that's entitled The Future We Want. And midway into that process, we're finding ourselves stymied in the challenges of the pandemic and the challenges of financing for this agenda have resulted that we haven't been able to meet the goals that we should have achieved at this midway point. A number of us have been working with peers around the world to address issues around internet connectivity, but not just for the sake of connecting communities to the internet, but to understand and recognize that the promise that the internet presents for radically changing people's lives and their conditions. And it's in this context, in the context of the discourse that's happening in the General Assembly, the conversations around how do we accelerate the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, in the context of the role and the important place that Africa as a continent has and often ignored, in the way that a number of folks from around the world, some here, some abroad, are collectively working to envision a better future, to facilitate for the implementation of this agenda, and to bring the internet to those who haven't had access. So we've got a dynamic panel of discussants here. We have a number of folks who will be respondents. We have folks who are joining us in the room, and I think this is going to be a great conversation. And I want to thank you all for being here. Event's done. Have a good night. No, I'm kidding. We're just getting started. To kick us off, I'm going to start with Dr. Lee McKnight. Dr. McKnight is a professor of information policy and information studies at Syracuse University School of Information Science, where he teaches a host of courses from blockchain management to cybersecurity and teaches courses on information policy. Dr. McKnight is a dear friend and colleague with myself and Dr. Smith, who have been working together to facilitate for the ushering in of the internet and rebuilding the internet across the continent of Africa. Dr. McKnight will be joining us virtually, where he has earlier today presented a paper, and we want to get him involved in this conversation while he's here with us to talk about the amazing work that he's been doing and the important way that he is going to contribute to this conversation. Dr. McKnight, the floor is yours, but before we get to you, I want to kind of narrow our conversation a bit. And my question to you, and then we'll allow you to respond and give you some time to talk, is you've been really driven towards helping to facilitate the creation of a project called the Internet Backpack. Can you talk about the Internet Backpack, your observations as both an academic and an activist in building and creating the internet and helping it to expand, and what role do you and the academic community and activists have in building an internet for people around the world, particularly those who are unconnected in rural communities and the urban poor? And while you're at it, solve world peace.
Well, first, thank you so much, Yusuf, that all for being here and up here. And if we're elsewhere out of the city, I read I'm not in New York City, but we're still working on that teleportation thing. So I did present a paper this morning at the 51st CBRC, which is kind of a premier internet policy conference here in Washington. I've been discussing with senior federal officials this event that you are a part of, and they're listening to them in our cause. Well, like in 4 pages on that, we just say something about like what led all of us out here is, well, some of the people here at this conference know I've been doing crazy things for decades. We don't have time to go through all that, but some that were led back 6-7 years ago into some actually possibly useful to people could use, which is the Internet Backpack, which was first shown as a concept, a unit with a right way unit to prevent all the case artists at Google San Francisco in 2016. The idea is like we had books, like everyone else had some emergency. Yeah, we had something that in a real emergency when you don't have communications would actually help you communicate. We recognized from the beginning, people in much of the world are living in a daily emergency without connectivity. It is an emergency. I mean, it's of life and death. It's threatening not to be able. Can anybody in this listen to this or off the zone? Can you imagine 24 hours without access to the internet? And in that pause, I began straining out. So that's the out and to put to play people. Yes, what we get back up track these. No, no, great. Please help me. Okay. Also, I'll just say to the internet backpack itself, it provides satellite that makes it. It provides 5G, 4G connectivity. It provides Wi-Fi. One way or another, it can connect. It also is not just a flexible form of connectivity that works everywhere. Just North and South Pole is also really appropriate because in many parts of the world, in real emergencies or in much of Africa, having reliable access to electricity is problematic. So we said this kind of Swiss Army type for connectivity has been used for education, for healthcare, for emergency response, and as it's evolved, it's the same resources. It's not really about the devices that have been capped. It's about the it's about the software that helps to coordinate them so that we in people anywhere in the world, it's as easy as using your cell phone. It's just a couple buttons. Can manage to connect this, set up your own ISP. Now and not with the build. So this has evolved into a with more experience and with great doctoral students and many generations of Syracuse University students. And I should note the core software program from the very first act deployed into the Democratic Republic of Congo is until the Democratic Republic of Congo. Its name is up at This is an African invention. This is something that Africans decided. It's this crazy professor to make it real. I've been working at supply with many people over years, helping try to make this real. It's getting closer. It has more potential applications, but the fact that it can connect you anywhere on the planet in a couple minutes, one way or another. That's the truth. And that truth means now there's absolutely no excuse for 2.6 billion people to not have access. And I'll stop there.
No, Dr. McKnight, thank you. There was a little bit of delay, but we appreciate your clarity about both centering the fact that Alil, as an African from the Democratic Republic of Congo, is it was helpful for you to situate us in recognizing Alil's role as an African to contributing to the development of the technology. It's equally important.
I should mention one more person.
Yes.
The others, hold on. Can I come back in for one
You
comment?
got it.
The second key person is a Haitian American who survived the Haiti earthquake and has sort of devoted his life to helping get this technology real. So this is for people around the world that need access.
Yeah, and I think so that just helps to advance the second part, or really what I wanted to ask the second question for you was, when we think about the African diaspora, both on the continent and beyond, we want to make sure that we have an expansive understanding of who the African diaspora is. So just for those who may not be as familiar, African Americans, Afro Caribbeans, Afro Canadians, Afro Europeans, the children of formerly enslaved peoples, and the children of immigrants and those who immigrated from the continent. Those are all folks who are captured in what we use and we talk about as the diaspora, the African diaspora. And one of the things, in fact, the first way that we got connected was thinking about, theoretically, how do we ensure that if we're going to build out technologies, and as we see the advancement of this Internet of Things revolution, that it's not enough to be able to have every device connected to the internet, right? So we have the internet, we have the web, folks are accessing it, but now every device is connected, whether it's your smartphone, your pacemaker, your watch, your refrigerator, your stove. We've talked about cybersecurity as a central component to the conversation, but we also have been remiss to thinking about what it means to protect the rights of individuals. And our first interaction was because of that conversation. Can you talk a little bit about a secure cloud architecture? What does that mean for people who don't know? And how has the secure cloud architecture been incorporated into the really important internet backpack technology?
Excellent. Yeah. So sorry, I get a little passionate and distracted too, but you can keep me back on track. So the pack itself, as I mentioned, is off-the-shelf hardware with some particular software that helps ensure a stable internet connection at the edge. But beyond that, what are we doing? We're making it possible, like from the edge, from anywhere on the planet, to connect to cloud services. And now in the cloud, or cloud to edge, we can have an architecture, we can have a framework so that a village in Africa has as sophisticated, like the best in world best class, world-class cybersecurity protection for its communications, for its village. What and also, well, there's an aspect of this with Syracuse University being involved at all, that we, under what's the institutional review board, if there's a commercial-led initiative, the conversations and access to information off the internet backpack, that's kind of gold. But we're Syracuse University. We, by law and policy, do not want to know anything about that communication. That or as little of certain basic things, or certain kind of studies, but in general, like what people are doing on the internet, that's not our business. We are prohibited from getting involved on that. So building in a secure cloud architecture with privacy rights, with human rights, with security rights, with ethics, with data rights, that's what we've been working on, Yusuf, with first in a first version of this, that with the city of Syracuse as a kind of prototype system, and with the top cybersecurity expert, Silicon Valley, involved as well, and then many people from industry. But as that evolved, again, into the internet backpack, we forgot to mention, it's also a software-defined data center. It has the same software on it that would be in some huge, or version of it that would be in some big data center. So you have, again, the capability to, by design, architect the cyber environment around the pack, the information environment of communities, to ensure that their values are protected. Back to the Haudenosaunee, they don't want people learning their language. Okay, so if they have a pack, they're not going to be sharing much of anything, because they don't want people to learn their native tongues. They want it's their culture, it's their values. Fine, that's possible. Whatever people want to share, what people don't want to share, and then again on our side, we're protecting it in with this bias in favor of, again, privacy, ethics, security rights by design into the information environment around the pack. Hope that helps. And with a red, yellow, green, like a way where people can, how do we know what people think? And we don't. But there's a simple red, yellow, green data risk classification scheme that everybody that I just said that already understands. Red data, careful, that's personal information. You don't want to share that. Yellow data, okay, maybe that's want to be somewhat cautious, but you don't worry so much. Green data, open data. Somebody wants to hack that, is steal that? Who cares? It's already open data. It's not a problem. So that's where the communities themselves, whether in Africa or around the world, are empowered to help. Like, we're not going to help maintain their own virtual information environments in a way that's meaningful to that community, and that keeps, like I say, it's not only the Haudenosaunee that don't want people in bombarding them, whether with malware or ads or whatever else. That's now, again, built in by design to the pack. And of course, we can't control how it's managed all the way, but by this NGO nonprofit coalition and civil society stakeholders like the Internet Society that are really key backers, we're not kidding about that. That's what we want. That's what we're doing. And no, it's not. We're not selling that data. And any pack that we're involved with, it comes bundled with these rights. I've been working on things around the Charter of Digital Rights in the Internet Governance Forum since 2008. It's translated into 27. I'm not kidding. I want to protect, and we all want to protect and empower rights. And working with you, Yusuf, and cybersecurity wizards and other wizards, we have come up with something that I think is simple and elegant, that can work. So far, we'll have to see how it rolls forward, but I think we're off to the right mindset. We don't want to be going out into, we don't want to bring this anywhere where we're not doing it, where it is like an invasive species. Here's something that's providing new capabilities, but with these default settings of protecting, again, human rights, data rights, security rights, privacy rights, and on and on. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. McKnight. We're gonna hold you there. We really appreciate you joining us from DC. Let's give Dr. McKnight a round of applause, please.
Thank you so much. Have a great conversation. I'll stay with the event for a little bit, but I'm going to have to leave shortly.
Absolutely. He's like the godfather of the internet. So we're just having him come to bless this gathering here today. We've got an amazing number of dynamic speakers here, and I want to just make sure that because it was a little difficult to hear Dr. McKnight, I want to report back a little bit of what he was saying to contextualize the conversation, because I think it's important, if we're going to have this really robust discussion, that we're all operating on the same level playing field. Is that okay with everyone? All right, great. So Dr. McKnight talked a bit about the Internet Backpack and its development, its design, its importance, how it was created, and how it's evolved over time. He then talked to the importance of, if it's going to be connecting to the internet, where's all your data going to go, right? We took a perspective from observing the way that African-American communities were surveilled in the US, understanding the way technologies can be invasive and violative of people's rights, of people's dignities, to make sure that we enable people to have secure, rights-protected conversations on the internet that are less likely to have breaches of access to people who shouldn't have access to that data. By having this red, yellow, green schema, where green is open source data, yellow is medium restricted, and red is fully restricted data, which you might want to have your healthcare data at, which you might want to have your educational data stored at, to ensure that folks' data isn't inappropriately accessed. This cloud architecture is essential to helping to facilitate that. So from the invention of the backpack to the further advancement of the backpack, from DRC to Haiti diaspora, to the kind of focus on how do we deploy these and taking a African-American surveillance experience, this technology is kind of really thoughtful about, really intentional by design, to make sure that we're centering communities who will be impacted. So I think as that's the base, what does that mean, right? What does it mean to have access to the internet, right? I think it's nice to hear about cloud architecture. It's great to talk about AI. It's fascinating to talk about smart cities. But when you're a government and you're a community who's trying to have access to basic things like food and water, why does the internet matter to you, right? So we're going to have Dr. Ephrem. Is he here? Yes, Ephrem Kwaa-Aidoo here from Ghana. It's important for us to connect to him, and I hope that he's able to join us here, because we want to make this a conversation that isn't just about people without bringing them into the conversation. Dr. Kwaa-Aidoo has a tremendous background. I'm going to really center us in talking with him about the experience of what internet connectivity means for the students who have access to this backpack, and his observations on the ground. Dr. Kwaa-Aidoo, please join us.
Yes, thank you very much, Abdul. Yes, it's quite interesting when you mention about AI and all the new ideas that are coming up when we talk about the use of the internet. However, in Ghana, we do have a big divide, rural and urban. You have the rich and the poor. You can still have people within the urban area where some people might find themselves in the poor communities with no or little or no access to the internet. And so even sometimes when we talk about introducing the internet into the education sphere, you'd find that in some instances we even make the divide worse, because those who are wealthy enough or in the urban areas who can access internet services tend to enjoy those services as compared to those who are not having those access. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, your sound is perfect. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You're great. You sound great.
Right. Okay. Right. Yes. So obviously, with the Internet Backpack, we introduced it to a library in the rural community in the central region of Ghana. Generally, in that community, we have about 5 schools thereabout, and the idea was that we introduce it into a space which is common to all the 5 schools in the neighborhood, and so we did introduce that. But as a matter of fact, if you look at internet average speeds in that area, we're looking at something like 0.05 download speeds, 0.05 megabit download speeds. In a home in an advanced country, you can get 200 megabit per second. And we're talking about a community that gets 0.05. Some of the schools don't have internet. Some of the schools don't have electricity, much more even have internet connectivity. So it's best that we introduce it in a centralized space. So we introduced the backpack into a community library. And fortunately, we're also able to get some donation of computers, desktop computers, into the library. So ICT teachers would send their kids there, students there, to practice the use of the internet. The teachers themselves can go in there and then use their computers to, as it were, research the content that they are going to teach. And we also have the opportunity to run some training programs to just give them some basics on internet searches and how to apply the content they find online into their classes. And there was a lot of response. Every now and again, I go to the library, a few days go to the library to see what is going on there. And it's quite exciting to see the young children in there attempting to use the internet, browsing. I mean, it might not always be about educational material, but just about getting in touch with what is going on in the world out there, reading the news, sometimes going on social media, and everything else is exposing these young people to the world out there, which they might not hitherto have. So these are some of the experiences that we've had with the youth.
Thank you, Dr. Ephrem. One follow-up question for you, because I think it's important for us to contextualize also just how different people's lives are, right? In the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, in the context of recognizing the fulfillment of this agenda, one of the areas that we often talk about is the way education can transform the lives of women and girls. And can you talk to us a bit about some of the beneficiaries of this type of work? How has this helped provide opportunity for women and girls? And how do we make sure that we are being intentional with their inclusion in this conversation?
Right, that's great. So what we did with the training program was that we tried to include almost an equal number. I think even there were more females in the training program than there were males. So as a start, we got all the teachers, and not just ICT inclined teachers. In fact, we had one teacher who I think might have been even close to retirement. So female teacher actually. So we had all these females get involved in the training, and so as a start, those people who are seen, in school, we see teachers a lot as role models. So we got those people involved as a start. And then in the library, we get all the school children, the both males and females, come in there and get an experience of the internet provided, and of course the backpack. Yes. So basically, what we did was to start from teachers who are generally mentors, and then we got all the students involved. And as a matter of fact, you'd find that I teach in a university, and we normally have less than 10% of our ICT classes being female. And one of the things that we were quite deliberate about was to also make known to these pre-tertiary school children the what do you call them? The opportunities, the career opportunities and the business opportunities that they can have as females. For example, I'll give you a very basic example. Things to do with, say, fashion, for example. You'd find that young girls might be interested in all kinds of fashion products, and some of these things can easily be found online, which you might not find even in a shop in a rural area. So they get exposed to all kinds of interesting things through the use of the internet. Yes.
This is fantastic. Let's give Dr. Ephrem Kwaa-Aidoo a round of applause, please. Really appreciate you joining us. Do not go away. We're going to come back to you, but we want to make sure to bring Dr. Smith in here because Dr. Smith, you've gotten to experience firsthand, in addition to what Dr. Kwaa-Aidoo has talked about with the backpacks implementation in schools in Ghana and in rural areas, and what that's meant for increasing girl participation, for helping students and young people envision a possibility that wasn't there, for communities to become better at their craft of teaching, right? Access to higher quality of education for their students. You've gotten to see that, and you've gotten to see it where communities that were impacted by the pandemic and impacted by distance were able to still participate in other ways that they couldn't. Can you talk to us a bit about what you saw in Costa Rica? And can you talk to us about why you're personally involved in this project? Because you reminded me, and I think because this conversation is situated in the discourse this week at the General Assembly, it's easy for us, especially those of us who came into the building physically, who again were not able to have access easily because there's like literally Secret Service like protecting every part of this area. We think about the dignitaries, we think about the heads of state, we think about the global leaders, the policy elites. We very rarely think about the grassroots. We very rarely think about those whose lives are directly impacted. So can you speak to us about why you do this work and why that is expressed in how this backpack technology, this internet inclusion endeavor is going to help transform the community?
Yes, thank you, Yusuf. Is it on?
I think, is it on? You can take this one.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be a part of this public discourse on how technology can impact future sustainability, the future sustainability of communities around the world, and for me specifically in Africa, in African countries. To begin, I should say that the views that are expressed by Syracuse University faculty and researchers are our views only. They do not represent the university or any other organizations that we're affiliated with. So before speaking of the Costa Rica project, and I actually got the opportunity to visit Costa Rica for this project, I'll go back to the first deployment of the Internet Backpack, which was in 2017 in the Democratic Republic of the Congo at Mount Nyiragongo, which is an active volcano. And if you remember, Dr. McKnight said that Mathi Alil, who is from the DRC, was instrumental in the development and design of the backpack, and that is not a coincidence. He's from a country that has experienced conflict and environmental disasters. So in Mount Nyiragongo in the Congo is about 10 miles from the city of Goma, which currently has a population of about 2 million people. In 2002, the volcano actually erupted and the lava streams reached the city of Goma. It resulted in the loss of lives for about 100 people. And at the time, the population of Goma was about 450,000 people, and about 400,000 of them were internally and externally displaced. About 300,000 people fled to Rwanda. So that was a major eruption that resulted in significant loss of life and loss of livelihood. In 2021, the volcano also erupted, but the impact was less devastating. And research scientists predict that in the near future, before 2030, there will be another major eruption. So in 2017, Syracuse University researchers and researchers at the Goma Volcano Observatory partnered to take the internet backpack to the top of the mountain to monitor the conditions of the volcano and to report these conditions back to the base camp at the observatory. They found that the backpack was effective in transmitting this data that is useful, that contributes to disaster resilience, which contributes to saving lives and to saving livelihoods. So in the DRC, the backpack, that project was proven to be successful for disaster management as an early warning system for the local communities. Following that effective deployment in the DRC, in 2018, the backpack was deployed in Liberia at local schools, both urban and rural schools. And researchers from the DRC, from Syracuse University, worked in partnership with the Ministry of Education and other ministries and public and private partners in Liberia to deploy the internet backpack at these schools. And STEM curriculum was integrated into the technology of the backpack. So for example, at an all-girls school, 2 high schools, these students went on a field trip from Monrovia, which is the capital city of Liberia, to Cape Mount County, which is in the northeastern region of the country. And they visited various farms to study sustainable farming methods. And they visited local forests to research how the forestry ecosystems can be better managed, because the Liberian forests are decimated by deforestation. So in Liberia, the internet backpack has also been effective in strengthening and enhancing the education sector and in improving agricultural techniques, the agricultural sector. And a following deployment of the backpack was in 2019 in Isla Caballo, which is a small island in Costa Rica. This is an island that at the time lacked electricity, and it lacked access to internet connectivity. And with the deployment of the backpack, it took 4 minutes to provide internet connectivity to this community, which, as Lee said earlier, as he discussed, this connectivity really changed the lives of community residents in providing access to education, to online information, to information about employment. And Isla Caballo serves as an example of how community-led initiatives that use these technologies can work together to ensure that their populations do have internet connectivity and do have the resources that can be provided based on this connectivity. I became involved with the project at about this time in 2019. And right after learning about this research and the applications that were ongoing, something bad really happened, which we all know, COVID-19. And in 2021, the research team at Syracuse University was funded by the Internet Society Foundation to conduct a project in Costa Rica with local partners, including the Democracy Lab Foundation, who we worked with, or who researchers worked with for the Isla Caballo project. So in 2021, the project was implemented to deploy the backpack to remote rural areas in Costa Rica to provide access to health information, specifically regarding COVID-19. And what we found was the community members used the backpacks, and even after the project ended, they continued to use the backpacks. They're still in use. Lee and I had the opportunity to visit Costa Rica as part of this project, and we visited a school, an elementary school, in a small classroom. There were from grades 1 to 6 in a classroom smaller than the size of this room. And we witnessed these elementary school children accessing the internet for the very first time in their lives with the internet backpack. It was at the top of the mountain. The government had not been able to provide internet connectivity. They had tried, but it was difficult. Just building the infrastructure to get internet to a mountainous community was difficult. And we saw elementary school kids set up the internet backpack in the rain. We didn't think it would work because it was raining, and they put a raincoat over it, and it still did work. And so just being a part of that, seeing the transformation of these young children's lives, the opportunities that they understand the internet provides, was also transformational for me. We continue to get reports about the project in Costa Rica, and in addition to the impact on education, where elementary school children and college level school young adults are using the backpack to access online education, jobs. But we also found that emergency responders and firefighters are using the backpack to coordinate rescue missions. Costa Rica, certain areas are prone to flooding, and so these emergency responders do use the backpack to provide imminent warnings to local community members and to coordinate their rescue missions. So for me, being a part of this project and seeing the impact on real life people has been really meaningful and, again, transformative for me.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I want to both appreciate and uplift a number of the things that you mentioned here, which I think are key and core. You raised the point of emergency response. You talked about how access to healthcare data and the sharing of healthcare and public health information has helped communities during a global pandemic. You spoke about education for elementary to middle to university students and what that's meant for them and their abilities to have access to state-of-the-art knowledge and education. All of these are things that the Sustainable Development Goals seek to address and really respond to. And so the internet as a potential catalyst and even accelerant is possible because we've seen it firsthand how that's happened. But there's also been a lot of changes in the landscape, right? There's changes because of the pandemic with increasing number of people going remotely and remote being a potential opportunity. There's been a transformation in the demands of people to have access to the internet as free, clean water, free air, clean air, free internet as kind of being some of the calls of the basic utilities that people need. In addition to how it's been transformative to you, one thing you mentioned to me that I thought resonated deeply is that we're digitalizing the grassroots, right? That like we are building this from the ground up. Can you talk about the experience, both going from Democratic Republic to Liberia to Costa Rica to our most recent conference at the Internet Governance Forum in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia? Can you talk about what that meant and how this backpack is being injected into the broader conversation around internet governance?
Right. So what you said is absolutely on point. The Internet Backpack has contributed and continues to contribute to achievement of the SDGs. And with the SDGs, we have all committed to reducing poverty, to protecting the planet, to committing to ensure that all people have prosperous and peaceful lives, and to achieve these goals by 2030. In the context of African countries, all countries have their own unique opportunities and their unique challenges. And so I think African countries, African governments have really an opportunity to use these technologies, to leverage these technologies, to maximize them in achieving the SDGs. In my research and in my travels to share my research and to participate in these projects, I have seen the impact on grassroots people, especially children, in learning circles. So for example, children in schools in many different parts of the world, but focusing on Africa, in Kenya, in Liberia, in the DRC, I have been a part of conversations similar to this, where these children come together and they talk about their projects on sustaining the forests, on combating or addressing deforestation, on planting sweet potatoes in Kenya, because sweet potatoes have nutrients that are important for pregnant women. So it is a crop that it makes sense to plant in certain areas. I've seen children and some high school young people, some elementary school people talk about the projects that they're able to engage with because they have access to the internet, because they can research their various interests and they can share these with people from all over the world. And this is the importance of these grassroots efforts, getting people together to share their experiences, to learn from each other. And I think that is actually a very Africanist way of thinking about things, that we're all in this together. And as one person thrives and succeeds, we all do.
Yeah, the notion of Ubuntu, right, is kind of core to African ideation systems. And I am, because we are, being the loose translation of what that means for those who may not be familiar. And I'm interested in the people who are making this happen, right? Because I think, again, in the context of the conversations that are happening outside these rooms and outside this building a few blocks away, it can seem very disjointed that very powerful people are able to make very important decisions about the way the world will be ordered and structured and the rules and norms that will govern it. But in this context, you have Jane, who's a graduate student, who's doing research and bringing. Can you talk about the people, the individual actors, the very regular folks who just care, who are making this come to life? And if you could please touch on Jane's research, because we want to honor and uplift the really important work of the brilliant people contributing to this.
There's water and food. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I think when we speak of internet governance, it can become sort of an abstraction that is relegated to intellectual discourse, and it leaves out the experiences of masses of people. It misses the lived experiences of the majority of people, and that's something we were talking about with your research. And so when we talk about people doing the hard work, We've talked about Mathe Alil, who is from the Democratic Republic of Congo, living in a country that has been impacted by conflict, by environmental disasters. He is dedicated to seeing that people in the Democratic Republic of the Congo have access to these technologies that improve their well-being. At Syracuse University, in addition to my colleague, faculty, there is an organization of students who are working on so many projects that use technologies to improve well-being in many different areas, in many different dimensions. And Lahari is here and will speak more about her project and the work of Syracuse University students at the grassroots. Across the world, we partner with community residents, many of whom have not been to college. In Costa Rica, for example, the community members we met who are using the internet have not graduated from college. Some do not have high school education, but they're determined to see their children get these benefits that make them competitive in the 21st century. And it's something to be said that in the 21st century, there are so many disparities, the digital divides that are in some instances increasing rather than declining. But again, there are like-minded people, like some people, as we spoke at the reception, who are committed to doing this work.
Thank you. I want to end this part of the conversation with allowing Lahari to be able to join us here. Lahari is a graduate student. We want to make sure to double click on what Lahari has done, because Lahari, as a graduate student who's supported this work, has made sure that, like, you guys got your emails, that we made the Eventbrite page, that we are able to communicate with folks. And if you've been a part of this conversation, you will still continue to be part of the conversation. But a lot of that has been coordinated by the efforts of Lahari. So we want to just make sure to celebrate and thank. We're a group that we want to give praise to everybody, right? We want to make sure everyone is recognized for the really important work that they do, because it takes each one of us to make this come to fruition. Lahari, before you go in, I just want to make some groundskeeping for folks, right? This part of the conversation after Lahari will stop, because this is the baseline, right? Like, now that we're all on the same page, now that we're kind of clear about, this thing that's the internet and this internet backpack and the sustainable development goals, and about those folks over there, it's about the folks here and online. We're then going to actually get into the conversations with our colleagues from around the world about what each of them are doing. And I think it's really essential for us to have a discussion globally, because really what we're actually demonstrating is if the world wants to have conversations about how it should govern itself, well, we need to actually facilitate to creating that. And the internet is one of the means to do so. So I'm going to let Lahari go. We're going to bring another discussant, Dr. Matthew Miller Kenyatta. Hopefully I got your hyphen right. Got it. Perfect. Up to join us in this discussion. We got a bunch of brilliant folks online from Africa, the UK, and around the world, and some beautiful, smart, amazing folks in this room who will kind of keep the conversation going. So we're all clear with the next steps and how we're going to keep the conversation going. Great. Perfect. Lahari, it's on you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Yusuf, for all the credit. I'm super happy now. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Once again, thank you so much for all the appreciation, and thank you all for having me here. I'm really honored to be here among all these people. So my name is Lahari Chowtoori. I'm currently a master's student pursuing my applied data science degree at Syracuse University. I'm here to represent the student organization YTech as vice president of the club. So YTech is actually a student organization. We are currently working from School of Information Studies. The organization actually provides multiple opportunities for students to work on cutting-edge technologies related to policy, technology, and business engagements. We also collaborate with multiple universities, corporate companies, as well as government and international organizations. Currently, we are working on 5 different projects. The main ones are the blockchain for climate smart commodities, internet connectivity in Africa, smart city initiatives. The Climate Smart Commodities project is actually a multi-university project, which is supported by US Department of Agriculture. The main aim of this project is to increase the supply and demand of climate smart commodities using the blockchain. The second project is the Africa Community Internet Program. This program is actually making it possible for the rural and remote parts of Africa to create and operate their own decentralized internet services. We'll dive deep into this a bit more after this slide. And the Smart City Initiatives is actually a new project that we got our hands on. We are working in collaboration with City of Syracuse as well as NIST Global City Teams Challenge on this. Innovare IoT Lab is related to Air Force Research Labs, which is pretty close to Syracuse University. We are also trying to get into talks with them to collaborate with us in the Africa Community Internet Program. The Cybersecurity at the Edge is actually from Craig's Newmark Foundation to increase research in the cybersecurity area. Well, the Africa and Community Internet Program. This is the one that I actually wanted to talk more about right now. This program was actually launched at UNIGF conference in 2022 by Africa Open Data Internet Research Foundation and Syracuse University. The main aim of this project is to increase the digital inclusion in rural Africa. And the backbone of this project is the Internet Backpack, which was introduced to you all by Professor Lee a while ago. So we are also planning to create this coalition alliance in cooperation with Africa Union, UN Economic Commission in Africa, as well as the other interested African nations by the end of this year. The main goal of our project is to get at least 5 African Union nations by the end of 2023, but we successfully achieved our goal and we are in talk with 16 African nations who are interested in our project. Well, this is the Internet Backpack that Professor Lee was talking about. It's the cloud-to-edge software, which is in the backpack that is the main functioning area of this. It provides satellite connection, 5G and 4G connectivity, as well as Wi-Fi connectivity. As Professor Lee mentioned, it is also a mini microgrid, which uses these solar panels. It can also, okay, I'm sorry.
And you could buy the solar panel for $199.99.
Yeah. Okay, just a second. Well, my Amazon quickly picked that I was talking about solar panels.
I think you were on the slide that talked about this one here.
Well, these are actually the parts of the Internet Backpack. It has a big satellite receiver through which we actually get the satellite connectivity, and Edgeware is the software that we are using. And the Incon International is the company that is actually manufacturing the backpacks in bulk. And solar panel is the one that we can use, as you all know, in the remote areas or somewhere if you are in South Pole or North Pole to connect to microgrid. It comes with 2 smartphones and 2 GoTonas. And it also has a cradle point router. Well, this is the plan that we had for Africa Community Internet Program. As we all know now that it was actually established in 2022, the plan was to reach at least 5 to 10 African nations, which are the first pilots of our project. And then by 2025, we were planning to reach out to all the interested Africa Union nations and measurably raise GDP on the continent, especially in the ACID participating nations, and also by progressing towards the SDGs, and finally present it in the G20 summit. So far, we have 10 African partner institutions, and also, as I mentioned before, we have 16 nations that are interested in our backpack, and we are possibly looking at 5 nations where we'll be deploying our backpack. And we're also in talks with the Air Force Research Labs, as well as US Department of Commerce and other state governments in US. Yeah, that's it so far. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lahari. So let's give her a round of applause for that really important slide. Okay, so now we're actually getting to the really important part of the discussion, right? Doctor, please join us. We'll pull. You can sit in the front row if you want, because I'm going to be coming to you. I want to make sure we get you in this conversation. We have a number of folks who are here from, as we said, around the world to talk with us today in their respective areas, right? A part of what we centered the conversation on today was around the Sustainable Development Goals, but Africa has its own vision called Agenda 2063, which talks about this vision of a United States of Africa, right? This interconnected, political, social, economically integrated continent that is inclusive of not just Africans on the continent, but also the diaspora, as we talked about earlier. So we have some folks who are on the continent, who are in the diaspora, who are in this room, who are on the ground, and we want to make sure to kind of include them as a part of this conversation, first as a respondent, and then as a part of the dialogue with us. Is that okay with everyone here? Everyone's saying yes, they had no choice because we were going to do that anyway. But I want to make sure that we center this in our ability to imagine, right? I often think that the experience of, and I'm African-American, the experience of Black people in this country is imagining a future that our ancestors couldn't exist within, right? The constant state of African Americans is a sense of imagining a future that doesn't quite exist today. We call that Afrofuturism. It's one way to talk about Afrofuturism. You may have heard about a really critically acclaimed movie called Black Panther, and that's another example of the literary types of ways that we've thought through Afrofuturism. But I, as an Afrofuturist, am committed to this work because I'm always constantly, obsessively thinking about the future of Afro-descendant, of all peoples, but in this context, of Afro-descendant people across the globe. And I think this conversation neatly abuts the discussion around both the way that the Internet Backpack can be an accelerant to accessing internet, to ensuring the implementation of this agenda and its acceleration, but also for envisioning an integrated African diasporic future, both on the continent and beyond. So I want to get us imagining in this context, and I think all the folks here will help us get our imaginary toolkit on. I know when you're in middle school, you probably heard of like, put your thinking caps on. We're going to put your astronaut hats on. Whatever is going to get you out of this world, we're going to get you there. Is that all right with everyone? Great. So we're going to start in this conversation with Dr. Annalee Babb. Dr. Babb is brilliant. She represents Barbados and comes to us from Barbados in an acclaimed career. I really have only gotten to follow her, so I'm super excited for her to be with us here today. And she's served in a number of roles in the government. I think Barbados is especially interesting because Barbados is not just the home of Rihanna, but also Barbados is the home, and she's bringing Rihanna energy with us today. But it's not just that it's the home of Rihanna. Barbados really has begun a different conversation around what it means both for reparations and repairing the harm of colonialism, of enslavement, and the forced migration of African people from the continent to the Caribbean, and really severing ties with the UK. So I don't want you to be the representative in that context, but I'd love for you to respond. If you can highlight for us some of those thematic areas, it'd be really amazing.
Well, I thank you all so much for being here, particularly Professor McKnight, as I call him, Lee, for the kind invitation and for your indulgence. I'm so excited about this conversation because a lot of what I should give acknowledgement also to the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Motley, who has really gone beyond our traditional international relations connections to reach out to Africa and its diaspora in very big ways. And so she has undertaken a number of initiatives that ground us in our history as a former colony of the United Kingdom. There's a lot of talk now about reparations and what those would look like. But beyond that, to understand that in all the ways that matter, certainly to me and to people like me, we are a one people, and that there is a story that we have to tell about history and about slavery and colonialism, but also about our ability to overcome that. That becomes very important. So for my part, I, for example, started a podcast called My Belonging that traces it. It examines the intersection between technology, creativity, culture, or history and technology innovation. And from my perspective, faith as well, and how that has shaped who we are as a people. So because part of my challenge, and Lee knows this because Lee was my PhD advisor when I did my PhD at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. And I know technology is important, but when we talk about access and about digital divides, it always bothered me when I studied this back when I was at Tufts, because I did not feel that technology itself was the only divide. So I developed what I call the 6-layer access model that talked about technology as the most basic layer. That should be a given. So the internet backpack, in a sense, becomes a very important part of the solution. And for example, the countries, the small island states of the Caribbean are small island developing states. They're known at the United Nations as SIDS, S-I-D-S. And for 20, 25 years before the notion of the climate crisis became a sexy issue that everybody is covering, we fought at the United Nations 20, 25 years ago to be recognized as a special class of a special part of the international community that had certain vulnerabilities and a lack of resiliency. I heard someone talk about resilience. But when you're a tiny island, so to give you an example, Barbados is 166 square miles. It is 21 miles long and 14 miles wide. Its population hovers somewhere probably around just a bit less than 300,000 people. So when you have a COVID, so I'll give you another example, the COVID pandemic, this country, because of the need to shut down everything during COVID in the early stages of it, this country's economy shed 30,000 jobs. When you're looking at a country with less than 100,000 people, 30,000 jobs is a massive blow. So we are now trying to recover from that. And as we're recovering from it, there is the eruption of La Soufrière, the volcano in St. Vincent. And the way that the winds were blowing, the ash inundated Barbados. So we had this volcanic ash that was so copious. Many of the roofs of houses collapsed. The cleanup was tens of millions of dollars, as I understood it, just to get Barbados cleaned up from that. And then on top of that, we had a freak storm. We call it a freak storm, where my house itself, which is a very strong structure, I lost parts of my roof. So how do you shed 30,000 jobs, people are not working, things are happening, and you then have to treat to these issues. Well, even with respect to things like connectivity, it becomes important. Now, Barbados has one of the best and highest internet penetrations and broadband penetrations in the Caribbean. But if something happens that is extreme, you're going to lose your connectivity. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, another example, is an English-speaking Caribbean country, but it's very mountainous. How do you reach people in areas that are very far and remote from the centers of commerce and from the capital? So I see a role for things like the internet backpack in that regard. But because Barbados and the English-speaking Caribbean are what we call middle to high income developing countries, we were traditionally graduated from a lot of loan financing and other things and grant financing that other countries would get. So it becomes a challenge for a vulnerable open economy, not very resilient, to be able to manage and to maintain communications with the world when you're surrounded by water. And everywhere you look at your highest point, you look around and you see water. It becomes a challenge. So the point being that the technology and the infrastructure and connectivity are important. But having said all of that, I would say just before I close and just open to any specific questions you might have, is that my 6-layered model said there were different other aspects of access that were important. The most basic layer is your physical access, which is things like the internet backpack, or if you have fiber, to the home and so on. All of that is important. But if you have not developed your economy enough, so when I was at Tufts University, I shared an office with a wonderful scholar from Egypt, Dr. Nabil Mahmoud. And I recall once we were chatting and he was very frustrated. I heard him mumbling to himself and saying, I said, well, what's wrong, Nabil? And he said to me, Annalee, they say that the internet is free, but it's not free. It's very expensive, because he was trying to do research on things that matter to him, and every document or study that he could find that would have helped him do his work, he had to pay for it. So if you don't have what I call financial access, you can't buy other people's products, and so it is a problem. And so one of the arguments that I made in my dissertation was that it's wonderful to talk about physical access, about infrastructure, about opening up all your telecom sectors to to competition and so on. But if you have not developed each of the layers of access to the point where people are what I call have what I called enlightened access, that's the ultimate layer, where you have local innovation, knowledge, and content creation, all you've done is open up your entire economy to a one-way flow of foreign exchange out, buying other people's knowledge, culture, content, creativity. And so that is flowing in, and your foreign exchange is flowing out. So my interest and what motivates me and my passion, I've moved from just the telecommunications layer and the infrastructure and those things I used to do, to talk more about how do we move from consumers to high value added producers of technologies, of solutions, innovations that actually help with things like climate change and agriculture, access to healthcare. When you have big data and all of this, do we have, so let me quickly tell you all 6 layers so we're clear. Physical access is the basic layer. Then there's financial access, that you have money. And then there's actually basic access, which is the skills. Can I read? Am I literate? Do I know how to plug a computer in, how to boot it up? This is important, that you know how to use the technology. The next layer is secure access, that you have consumer and provider protections that make people have a level of confidence that they can partake in this information, knowledge economy, internet economy, whatever you want to call it, digital economy, and that they are safe, that our children are safe, that they're safe from predators, that our elderly are safe from predators who are stealing their money and so on. Next layer is policy access. We talked, but we didn't really touch very much on artificial intelligence. This is a new area. It's evolving rapidly. And our governments and policymakers, regulators, and legislators are way behind the eight ball on what we need to do to make sure that we are helping to write the rules of the game for a technology that is hugely invasive with respect to what it means for being human. And so you can't have that conversation just in developed countries and in America. So how do you begin to involve other nations and other people in how that is shaped? And ultimately enlightened access, where we are all innovating and creating value, and we can grow our economies and societies in that regard. I will stop because this area is an area that I feel very, very, very passionate about, and I could talk all night and tomorrow on it. So I will pause and you may open the floor if you have any specific questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, because I almost felt like I was in church and I wanted to say amen. The crowd is with us here. I think that it's really essential for us to be, situated in the conversation. And I really appreciate the layered approach that you proposed here. I want to take a moment to see if anyone in the audience has a question that they may want to pose. And if not, I want to get to you on AI, because I think it's really important, but I want to pull in other discussants, if that's okay with you, to before
Absolutely.
I can get to that's an important note, and I don't want to lose that in the broader conversation. I'll circle back to it, and I think I have a great person to dovetail that conversation here with you. We've often talked about, and I think the third layer that you talked about is digital literacy, in essence, right? And the ability to understand how to leverage and utilize these technologies. And when a number of us went to Ethiopia at the Internet Governance Forum last November, almost a year ago, we met some brilliant, and I use that word a lot tonight because I think it's really important to recognize how truly brilliant a lot of these folks are. We met a number of young people from Ethiopia. In particular, Ethiopia opened us and welcomed us with open arms. It's the cradle of human civilization. It's, where some of the oldest human remains have been found. And we were there, and it was, as a Black person, just inspiring to be there. It was inspiring to be in the continent and conversation with others from the continent who are often excluded from the conversation, but were able to participate because it was on the continent. And we met a young man there who I was like, if we're going to have this conversation, I want to make sure he's able to be part of it. Naol, Edesa, I really want to bring you in here because you do a lot of tremendous work around training people and engaging folks on how do we have what Dr. Babb talked about as that third layer and digital literacy being core to that. So if you can jump in to join us, he's here with us from Ethiopia. It's very late for you. And so I want to make sure to get you in early before you fall asleep on us. But can you talk to us about your work and what you do? Introduce the audience to you and your work, and really how you're helping to bridge the gap in the digital divide and making sure that we have digital literacy skills.
Thank you so much, Yusuf, and thanks for inviting me again. Like Yusuf said, it's past midnight here in Northeast. But it's really interesting that I joined this conversation because I've learned a lot from what other panelists also shared. So maybe from Ethiopia side, like what we've been doing, like to bridge the internet accessibility, like internet penetration was that. So we've been providing different training programs for the youths and also like for the communities, especially those who are in the rural areas. So in Ethiopia, like when we see like the reason why internet is not that much, like the penetration is very low, is that it's because like even from the accessibility, like most of Ethiopian peoples, not only Ethiopian, like Africans live in rural areas, especially when we come to Ethiopia, like about 21% of them are living in only 21% of them are living in like the urban city where the infrastructure is available. So for us, what we've been doing is, so we try to reach out to like donor agencies and development agencies and also corporates to help us like scale this training program so that we can reach more people, so that we can bring more Ethiopian community to the internet world. So what we've been doing was like we found partners, especially on the training side. We partnered with Google. So the company I represent is called Africa on 18. So we're based in other African countries as well. We are in Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Ghana, and also here in Ethiopia. So on behalf of like those users and communities, because for us, we need some resources like to operate as a business. So we reached out to these donors and they supported us like to provide training program for the users and also the community at free of cost, so that we're not going to charge them. We expose them to the internet, and so that they get to know what internet is, like having the benefit of having internet. So this program really helped like to bridge the skills gap, especially in the users and in the business sectors. So we train them on like even the opportunities that they will be having because of our education policy in Ethiopia and also in most of African countries. So we don't actually access like the technical skills on the internet side. So we mostly focus on the theoretical side, which is not going to help them like to access internet. So this partnership that we create with donor agencies and development agencies and also corporates really helped us a lot, like in bridging this skills gap to bring the community to the internet. So maybe I also met Yusuf last year in Internet Governance Forum, and before that, like even before COVID in Ethiopia, like the number of internet users were like very low. So only 16% of the community were using internet out of 120 million people. So this was because of different reasons. The first one is like accessibility. So infrastructure was like even now currently the internet infrastructure is very it's a key challenge that we are having. The fact that most of the people are living in the rural areas, so accessibility is like still now it's a very big challenge, and also internet affordability. Even so, we only had like one internet service provider, which was dominated by the government. So because of that, like there was no competition, and this really brought like the challenge of affordability because the internet price, the internet cost was very high. And because of that, like most of the people were not able to access these internet services. And also the third one is like even our education policy was not like, as I've mentioned earlier, because it was not convenient. Even like we don't mostly focus on digitalization, usage of internet and all that. So those challenges really brought like reduced the number of internet users in Ethiopia. So after COVID, because of different reasons, even the government were like people forced to use internet in because of different reasons, because of like those social gatherings were not allowed, and so because of that, a lot of people just like were coming to the internet. And also at that stage we were like moving to different cities and also regions, even to the urban areas, to provide training program for the community. And that really helped a lot, like in bridging this gap and bringing the people to the internet. So now, like after 3 years, before in 2019, the internet usage in Ethiopia were, as I've said, it was 16%, but currently, like in the last 3 years, so it's gone up to 29%, which was like a big increase. So the impact program that we've been running, like the digital literacy program, really helped a lot. So for us, like because of the workforce that we have, we're limited. So what we've been doing, well, we move to different cities and we build the communities of digital ambassadors that really that's going to be working for the community like as an advocate. So they will be training. We will do like a TOT kind of training program where we train some of the digital ambassadors in different rural areas and also the cities, other regional cities, so that they can be an advocate for their community and train other communities as well. That really helped us a lot in reaching like hundreds of thousands of communities in bridging this literacy gap. So maybe if you have any continued questions on this one, I would be up on that, and maybe not to take more time. Prefer to stop here. So thanks so much.
No, that was perfect. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you joining us because it's super late on your side of the world. But we want to make sure that we, Ethiopia is an important country for a lot of reasons regionally, and I think as the home of the African Union, it's a place wherein, if there is a genesis of a revitalization of a United States of Africa, Ethiopia is a central component to that in its being the capital of that United States. And so I want to pull into the conversation a tech policy and government programs manager who is from Uganda, Issa Buka. He's joining us here tonight as well. Issa, I want to talk to you a bit about this African Union vision for Agenda 2063, right? Agenda 2063 is this African Union agenda that talks about the political, social, and economic integration of Africa. And you've worked on to help facilitating that and bringing that to life and working in the agreements that were necessary. Can you talk about the role, Issa, that the internet has in that? And can you talk about what we mean when we talk about a United States of Africa and how the African diaspora are bringing back in, the important discussion points that Dr. Babb put here and kind of the way that we're having this conversation today? What role does the diaspora play in helping to facilitate for its fulfillment? Issa, you got the hard questions.
Thank you, Yusuf. Thank you. Like all other speakers, it's really privileged to be here and have these really candid conversations, learn from other speakers, and as well share from our experiences and see how to take Africa forward. But just to add on your definition of Agenda 2063, which is basically, like you said, a framework of social economic transformation over a 50-year period. So this was drafted in 2013 to 2063, hence Agenda 2063, but basically driving towards a prosperous, united people of Africa, designed to address a wide range of issues, including, like you said, technology, but things like economic development, governance, infrastructure, social well-being, etc. And all this is fulcrum across finding Pan-African solutions to contemporary African problems, which we all know and are not foreign to. But going back to how internet or technology plays a big role in this, and I want to underscore three main points, which the previous speakers have already touched on. And one is skills development and ensuring that we have innovative workforce. So we have, for example, Dr. Lee talked about the backpack technologies, but do we have the manpower that's trained and skilled to actually operate or even pick up data points to iterate this kind of technology and provide input that suits the current terrain that it's serving? So that's one way in which internet or the technology plays a big deal in advancing Agenda 2063. The second one is the previous speaker just talked about, and the doctor also touched on, is digital inclusion is really key. Like you said, a big part of Africa is within the rural parts of demographics, which is defined by poverty. So how do we ensure that all Africans benefit from the digital inclusion, bridging the digital divide and ensuring internet access with things like the internet backpack technology? And lastly, without going into any other details, is the ACFTA, which is Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which ensures that we push for a single market of goods and services across Africa, taking away all tariff and non-tariff barriers. And one way technology can facilitate this is by, for example, you're talking about free movement of labor and capital. So thinking things like streamlining immigration, e-processes, things like custom processes, payment of taxes, and seamlessly, if I want to move from Uganda to Lagos or vice versa, I can easily get that immigration access or move that kind of capital seamlessly and tackle these barriers from an African trade and investment perspective. So without getting into too much detail and give time to some of the speakers, since it's late right here, I would invite questions if any.
We're gonna hold the questions to the end so we can get through all the discussions. But I wanna thank you, Issa, for both helping to situate the folks here and around the world around understanding what both the agenda looks to achieve and why it's essential, and how in the place that the internet can have in helping to facilitate for it, both from a free trade perspective, but from an immigration and customs and trade perspective broadly. As we said, we wanted to help us imagine and begin to think critically about building a future. And I talked a bit about Afrofuturism as central to that. Dr. Miller Kenyatta, I almost jacked that up, but I got it. What is it? Dr. Matt works too. Dr. Matt is with us here from University of Pennsylvania. Brilliant in person, is gonna work with us. You're an Afrofuturist. You are an urban planning and design expert. You're a technologist. You think about the ways that our space helps to facilitate the imagination of what we can create, both physically and beyond. I want to bring you into this conversation because we've known each other for like 15 years. And we've talked about the ways that our first interaction was around this important and really innovative technology around urban planning and really clean technology solutions to the urban farming landscape. But we've always seen it for more than that, and we've imagined it as beyond that. Can you talk to us a bit about your research, your work, and how imagination helps to create the design of technology and justice, and how these two pieces have to go together? Because if we don't think about, well, let me stop talking. Let me let you talk. Here you go.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I was going to say that would face this way. Yeah, sure. All right, cool.
You can take
right here. No, bring that up. Bring that. Okay. Hey, everyone online. Thanks for whatever your time zone is for sticking around, and hey, everybody as well here. So I'm really full from just everything that's been said and trying to process like what aspect of this conversation I want to chime in on with both of you here and everyone online as well. So a little bit about my work. I'm really interested in the intersection of place, taste, and urban change. So really thinking about how do you bring culture into a process that is governed by ideas like design justice. So if you're not familiar with design justice, it's a way in which you center the worldviews and lifeways of marginalized people in the design process of anything, technologies, places, yeah, it works at all scales. I don't have it in front of me, but there's a really cool sort of set of principles from the Technology for Social Justice Network, or the Design Justice Network. I'd recommend you look those up, but that's a lot of how I'm processing this conversation. I think just in general, so as a planner, I can sort of straddle both the sort of world of practical, how do you get stuff done, but also as an academic, like the theory and the big whys and all the sort of like, I think of as fun stuff. So the real, I guess the thing I'm sitting with, and I'd love to just ask questions more than like spew out my own kind of ideas, but how do we sort of think more? So just to back up a little bit, a lot of the work that I do is around community engagement, so community-based design, and facilitative leadership is how I think about that. So there's three aspects of facilitative leadership. There's results, there's relationships, and there's process. And that trifecta, all three of those come together to really help build capacity, build momentum. Excuse me. And a lot of what I've heard so far from the conversation has been a lot about like results and really products. Like I've heard a lot about products, but I'm really curious about questions around the relationships and the process by which this gets done. So two sort of very separate strains that I'm walking into this with. One is the realization, particularly as a Black geographer, of the research around urban fantasies, like African urban fantasies. So there's some great research around this showing basically how plans are being digitally produced by global sort of global architecture and engineering firms that have visions for Africa that often aren't coming from people in Africa. They're really splashy, glossy sort of images, but no one asked for those really, other than like the government. And so there's this very dystopic sort of set of literature out there emerging right now about who actually is a smart city for? Like, what is that who's that supposed to serve? So I want to pose that kind of big question to people that are here. But then also the other question, the other side of me that's more on the, I guess, the more optimistic side is what does utopia, or what does a sort of smart city, Black sort of Afrofuturist city look like from the worldviews of people who are there? A lot of what I've heard has been a lot about the poverty, which is real. I've heard a lot about the sort of set of issues and challenges, disasters, particularly environmental disasters. But how can we approach this idea of community internet, smart cities, and all of that from an asset-based perspective? What can the people who are on the ground contribute to this as a process? So those are a lot of the questions I'm really sitting with right now, and I'd love to just, surrender over to anyone that has thoughts in the room or anyone online. So,
Yeah. So first, thank you for that, because I think it's key for us not to lose sight of the necessity to continue center the people who are going to be impacted, and not just as an afterthought or not just as a checkbox, but as core to the development of technology, to the development of their communities, to the advancement of the literature and research and cultures that will emerge from them. So thank you for reminding us of that. I want to pose that question to Kwaku. Kwaku is with us. I hope he's still here. I believe he is. I see his lovely picture here, looking very regal. Kwaku is here with us, and Kwaku is he actually helped us kind of conceptualize the concept of digitizing the grassroots, right? This notion of making sure that we like get this stuff, and actually more concretely that we build this from the grassroots up, right? I think the central thing that we try to create through this entire conversation is that this conversation is very intentional with making sure that we are centering the communities, not as part of it, but as core to facilitate for its outcome. So Kwaku, if you can talk a little bit about, if you can respond to Dr. Matt, that would be helpful. And then Sarah, Dr. Sarah Kiden, I want to make sure to get you in this as well, because I think you bring great perspective, both from East Africa and beyond. Kwaku, you still here with us?
Hi, Yusuf. Yes, I'm still here. Yes.
My brother. So the question for you is, how have we, and how do you imagine centering the grassroots, right? Communities, students, activists, organizers, designers, artists, as the leaders for the work to imagining and building both the United States of Africa from a design, technology, and all those perspectives. Is that fair? Okay.
All right. Thank you for that. And yes, so basically, I also just want to just situate it in that perspective. Yes, we've seen that with the empowering of our communities from the grassroots, with technologies and internet skills and digital skills, they are not just able to connect, but also to be able to innovate and also enhance their community settings. And I want to anchor this, especially with the connectivity tool that Professor McKnight talked about, the internet backpack, and being able to, one, give them the technologies from the grassroots to be able to connect. And then from that community perspective, to be able to use the internet, not just connecting to the internet, but also helping each other in the communities, reaching the globe or the global village, as we like to call it now, and also enhancing their own perspectives. But one thing that we see and of experience, I mean, I'm just coming back from the African IGF in Abuja, Nigeria, and the excitement about the community networks that we are championing, in which the Internet Backpack is one of the main anchor tools that we are using for this program, is that the community is excited. Africa is excited, not just for connecting ourselves and engaging in all sorts of digital skills and connecting with ourselves, but also to be able to leapfrog ourselves or leach forth into this 21st century in connecting with each other across the continent, and also to reach across our various counterparts across the globe. And this is not just something that we are excited about and just doing, but we've seen it helping. I think the project in Ghana, which we talked about earlier, about the communities being able to connect themselves, but I'm connecting now with you by my phone, you know, and the ability to just engage us in conversation as this moment in which other members of our communities and also across Africa are listening to us and excited about, is something that I think sometimes it becomes part of our lives in enhancing ourselves and also being able to enable us be not only literate, but also bringing those who hitherto would not have the connectivity, but also enhancing their lives and their livelihood. And I think that those are very important points that we need to hammer, that the grassroots also have a role to play. The grassroots need to be able to be connected, but more importantly, we enrich the process in them being able to come on board, and we are very happy to support this. And I think that's something that we can take along, and I'm happy to engage in the conversation from that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sarah Kiden, I really want to make sure to bring you in here, both to continue with the theme that Dr. Matt and Kwaku brought here, but also really to kind of respond to Dr. Babb, who talked a bit about the role that AI and emerging technology plays in this conversation. You know, we think about, you know, the power to imagine is significant, but there are also the tools to help us facilitate for that to be developed, right? Generative AI being one of them, and a whole host of other technologies. Can you, as a technologist, as a public, you know, internet technologist, as a person who cares about humanitarian work, and as a brilliant scholar and activist scholar, as I would situate you in that legacy, can you share with us about that, and then also your work at ICANN and beyond?
Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Sarah Kiden. I like to refer to myself as a public interest technologist and a design researcher. So I'm interested in different issues at the intersection of technology and society, but more recently I'm doing work around the design of Internet of Things technologies. And with that, I'm thinking about how you can embed values like safety, integrity, and trust in the design process. And I was actually very happy to hear Dr. Annalee talking about the different layers of access. So I just want to bring a bit of a conversation we had earlier this week at the Africa IGF. I don't know how many of you attended, and we had a session on Internet of Things, and there were really interesting discussions that came out of that. The first issue that I want to raise is just thinking about sustainability, not after a process, but at the start of a process. So we were talking about IoT devices and how they are all around us, and they're actually physical devices. So you have the physical aspect, the physical part of your device. But these devices are created from minerals that come from the earth. So 50, as in 50, out of 90 naturally occurring minerals are used to create these devices. In layman's language, your computer, your phone, whichever device you use, is basically created from the environment, and we need to protect the environment. So you can't think about sustainability at that point without thinking about how these devices are mined. I think we went into a bit of a discussion around the living conditions of the people in the mines. I don't know how many people even care about those things, but some of the devices, like for example, cobalt, 60% of cobalt comes from the DRC. And cobalt is used in lithium batteries. Like most rechargeable batteries you have are made from lithium batteries. But nobody really thinks about the people who are mining these things. And when they're mined, of course, the companies end up selling them really expensively. And of course, we buy them expensively, but we have to think about sustainability from that point of view, the people, the social aspects of technology, which is usually not talked about. I think I highlighted that time examples of where some of the big tech companies, who I will not name today, were named in a lawsuit by people from the DRC. And it was around just the conditions for the people who are in the mines. These big tech companies actually asked for the court case to be thrown out. And the reason they said that is because they subcontract the mining process to a local company. So in my opinion, I think we really need to do a bit of work around that area. I feel like there's a gap. So if anyone is willing to work on that, it's an area that I'm happy to work with. So I can continue with the rest of the things that we talked about. For example, people were raising issues around data protection and just any legislation around data protection, bearing in mind that on the African continent, I think most countries don't have data protection laws. So you have all these smart devices collecting massive amounts of data. Some of that data is personal data, and you don't have any laws that protect your data. And there's the Malabo Convention, which I think you've heard about. It's around cybersecurity and sort of developing legislation for privacy on the African continent. But to this day, only 15 countries have signatories, and this process has been going on for over a decade. So what does that mean if we are moving towards a world where you have all these smart connected devices collecting massive amounts of data, and yet you cannot protect people's data? We also talked about some underlying infrastructure, which I'm happy that people have talked about today. So it's not about the devices themselves, but do you have access to the internet? I think Africa is still the least connected continent. So we don't have that many people who are connected. The last time I checked, it was about 50%. I don't know, maybe the percentage has gone up, but we still have very few people who are connected. And besides that, thinking about other infrastructure like electricity, there are places where people don't have electricity and you're trying to power a smart city. So how do you power a smart city without access to electricity? I think there were some concerns around trust for the government. The general feeling I got is that many people do not trust their African leaders. So they were saying, how do we trust that they will legislate or they will create policies that actually protect us in terms of technology? And finally, maybe the other issue which I've had many panelists talking about today is the area of skills. So if you look at the Internet of Things, it's not like one thing, it's multifaceted. I've talked about the big data, I've talked about the physical devices, I've talked about you need machine learning algorithms to interpret that data so that it makes sense to people. So you need all sorts of skills. You need someone with skills to build a device. You need somebody with analytic skills, robotic skills, electronic skills. So we're just thinking about if we have the right kind of skills to set up, for example, a city that we would call smart. So these are just some of the things that I'd like to raise today, but I'm happy to engage and hear from other speakers. Thank you.
No, wow. There's so much there to pull from, right? It's important for us to censor this notion that like all of our devices, every one of ours, whether it's our iPhones or our iPads or our MacBooks, clearly I'm talking about Apple products, but many other companies' products have materials and minerals that come directly from Africa, and communities who are mining and are exploited are not having access to that and aren't benefiting. I remember talking to a colleague yesterday, and then I'll go to David for the last set of comments. I remember talking to a colleague this week and telling them that, you know, Apple is a multi-trillion-dollar company, and 60% of the world's cobalt, which is largely used, as Sarah said, in their devices, are from the DRC, but the DRC doesn't have any of that money. The DRC isn't a country that's a trillion-dollar country, isn't a $500 billion country, and it's the exploitation of African intellectual capabilities, it's the exploitation of resources, it's the exploitation of data to be mined and sold and utilized for profit that is often left out in this conversation around the acceleration of technology. So thank you for bringing that here, Sarah. David, you're our last responder here tonight in the last few minutes we have, and we want to invite you here to the conversation to join us and to please contribute to the conversation, because we want to make sure that we leave here with the fullest perspective, and we think you've got some great insights to share. So please, David.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to commend everyone who has just spoken. You've hit on so many important points. And where we come from, I'm the CEO of a global nonprofit organization called Geeks Without Frontiers. For this conversation, I should point out that we also serve as the program management office for a global program called the N50 Project. N50 stands for the next 50% of the world's population who have access, but they're not using it because of affordability issues, lack of skills training, other elements of digital inclusion, key factors therein. And we are partner driven. We have about 155 partner organizations from the digital ecosystem who want to bridge this digital adoption gap. And we're project focused. We're implementing projects that are designed to address real needs that we hear about after listening from the communities that we seek to serve. So earlier there was discussion about indigenous communities. There was a discussion around gender. How do we design projects that really strike the chords of those types of members of the ecosystem? We formulate groups of women. All of our projects for gender, or that may relate to gender, are reviewed by a group of women, thought leaders, subject matter experts. And it is women who are advising us on the most effective designs for our projects as they relate to women and or girls. Ditto on indigenous communities. We have a board of advisors of indigenous thought leaders only. No non-indigenous people are on our board of advisors. And every project that we do that has anything to say about an indigenous community, they review it, they evaluate it through the indigenous lens. Anything short of that, in our experience, is second best in terms of getting project design right. All of our projects also are designed to be sustainable. That means financially viable. Typically, there needs to be a business case that will close. Where does the money come from? Not just CapEx, not just to buy the systems involved, but what are the recurring costs, the OpEx? And that's why in the chat bar, I've been asking persistently these questions about the internet backpack. I saw that it's a UN grade pricing structure. And the pricing that I saw in the presentation, as exciting as the concept is, it's an old design. The UN has been buying those from Inmarsat for decades, and it's very expensive. And it will not be sustainable financially for health applications in low-income communities, nor for education, nor for almost any applications in low-income communities in rural Africa, much less Asia, the Middle East, or other markets that are developing. So the technology piece is actually, I agree with one of the previous presentations, the technology piece is actually one of the easiest to get right. You can go out and do a request for quotations, request for pricing. You can do requests for information into the industries, and you can do research and find out who has the best mousetrap at the best price. The harder piece is the business case, how these projects can stand up and not only stay standing, but expand. That's what we're after. So we're doing projects across Africa right now. They're all meant to be part of a business case that is sustainable. We have hard targets we're hitting. And I say hard in every meaning of the word. These projects, and I was joking with the panelists before this program began today, saying that every project that we have ever done is hard. These are the toughest operating conditions that we're trying to tackle. And we need good regulations. We need good policy. We need good spectrum allocations. We need the right partners on the ground who are going to own the solution. We need digital skills building. We need to have the design of the project meeting the actual needs of the community that the project is pointed at, and much more. This is hard. So that's what we're doing right now. And we're really excited that you all have set up this conversation. We would love to feed in with you to go further, faster, better on achieving SDGs. We're cutting across all of them with connectivity and data solutions that are designed for local community needs. So that's who we are. And we look forward to continuing this dialogue with you. Thank you.
Thank you. There was so much to respond there, but we are pressed for time, and I try to make sure to be respectful of everyone's time. We want to give a round of applause to every single person who's participated in this conversation, both in person and abroad, particularly for those who joined us from the continent and the Caribbean and the UK and elsewhere. We really appreciate you both coming here, participating. This is the beginning of multiple conversations, right? We want to make sure that we are being thoughtful, comprehensive, and we want to bring this to fruition. But we can't do it without each of you. So if you've participated in today's discussion, we'll make sure that we keep in touch with you. Please let's share each other's correspondence so we can make sure that we're building this internet together. I want to thank a few folks, and I'll be remiss if we didn't. We want to first thank the staff and the crew here at Syracuse University's Lubin House for hosting us, for giving us the great food, for making sure we got some great drinks, and for the Renee Crown Honors Program for underwriting that. So thank you, Dr. Smith, for making sure that happened. Let's give her a round of applause. We want to thank Jolie and the Internet Society US New York City chapter for live streaming this and making sure that we can connect to everyone and getting us all coordinated virtually around the world, and for documenting this for future people to visit and look to and engage with and dissect and support. So Jolie, thank you for your work and the Internet Society. We want to thank the brilliant people who've really showed up today. I think it's a really difficult thing to come on a Friday to a 3-hour conversation, but you stayed, and most of you stayed throughout. So thank you for being here, and sorry we couldn't get a chance for you to interact, and we'll make sure to be cognizant of that in the future. And we want to thank the folks at ACIP, which is the Africa Community Internet Program, for really helping to facilitate this conversation. We're going to next be going to Kyoto, Japan, to participate in the UN Internet Governance Forum conversations, where we hope to be having more conversations about this. As all conversations, there's every side, and we welcome it. We want to be able to provide the best for our communities. We want to make sure that we are advancing all of the goals and really going beyond to really reimagining and really furthering the vision of the United States of Africa. But that requires work. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be work that's going to be very difficult, and it's going to be work that's going to be not always recognized and acknowledged, but it is going to be work that we are committed to. So thank every one of you for joining us tonight. Thank you all for being here, and we will let you go, I think, 2 minutes over time.
folks online, really appreciate you. We will follow up with you all virtually to make sure that we recognize, acknowledge, and uplift you. So thank you very much.
For coordinating this.
Oh, yeah. And with that, let's eat some rest of the food and shuffle our way out. Thank you.